In 1929, he was the most famous man in America. He controlled an empire worth over $100 million, the modern equivalent of over $1 billion, built on the single, simple commodity of illegal liquor. He corrupted judges, owned the police, and ordered hits that silenced his enemies forever. He was Al Capone, Scarface, the true king of Chicago. He was so powerful, so protected, and so ruthless that the press gave him a terrifying nickname, the Untouchable. The common myth says he was brought down by machine gun fire in rival gangs. The astonishing truth is that the man who survived a dozen assassination attempts, who fueled the most brutal organized crime war in American history, was ultimately defeated not by another gangster, but by an army of clerks and accountants led by a single incorruptible agent. This is the story of how a street thug built a criminal empire and how the simplest of laws brought down the untouchable. Our story begins far from the smoky backrooms of Chicago. Alphonse Gabriel Capone was born in 1809 in Brooklyn, New York, to Italian immigrant parents. He was bright but undisciplined, dropping out of school in the 6th grade after hitting a teacher. His youth was spent on the notorious streets of New York, where he quickly fell in with the notorious 5 Points gang. It was while working as a bouncer at the notorious Harvard Inn that he earned his infamous scar given to him in a razor attack after he insulted a woman. He hated the name Scarface, insisting the public call him a dealer in antique furniture. His true rise began with a single phone call from his mentor, Johnny Torrio. Torrio, a shrewd crime boss, relocated Capone to Chicago, where Prohibition had just been enacted. The year was 1920, and the American government had just created the largest black market in history. This was the moment Capone found his genius. Prohibition banned alcohol, but it did not eliminate demand. Johnny Torrio and Al Capone saw the opportunity to treat organized crime like a legitimate business. They built breweries in Chicago, controlled the entire supply chain from illegal manufacturing to trucking and delivery, and sold vast quantities of beer and liquor through a network of speakeasies. This enterprise, soon known as the Chicago Outfit, was a financial machine unlike any seen before. Capone's unique approach was to combine meticulous business management with shocking brutality. Capone introduced accounting methods and efficiency to the criminal underworld, ensuring his operation was run like a corporate entity. He focused on profits, not territory. However, to protect those profits, Capone launched a ruthless war against rival gangs, including the powerful Irish North Side gang led by Dean O'Banion. The violence that followed was unprecedented, turning Chicago into a war zone and cementing Capone's image as a fearsome kingpin. He controlled the flow of alcohol, gambling, and prostitution across the entire city. Capone's true genius was not in violence, but in corruption. He understood that his empire could not thrive without the complicity of the authorities. The price of doing business was buying the police, the politicians, and even the courts. It is estimated that a staggering number of Chicago police officers were on Capone's payroll, receiving regular, handsome payouts to look the other way, ignore speakeasies, and even provide protection for his shipments. Capone exerted massive influence over Chicago's government, ensuring that whenever he was arrested, usually for carrying a concealed weapon, the charges were quickly dismissed, often by a judge whose loyalty had been purchased. This system of pervasive corruption shielded him from virtually all legal consequences for his criminal activities, earning him the nickname, the Untouchable. The public's view was deeply divided. His supporters, often the poor, the working class, and the immigrants, saw him as a modern-day Robin Hood because he opened soup kitchens and gave money to the needy during the Great Depression. His haters saw him as a monster whose violence and corruption were destroying the moral fabric of the nation. Capone's brutality reached its peak on February 14, 1929, with the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre. This was not a spontaneous shootout. It was a cold, calculated execution designed to eliminate his last great rival, Bugs Moran. Capone's men, disguised in stolen police uniforms, lured 7 members of the Moran gang into a garage. They lined them up against a wall and opened fire with machine guns, killing all of them. The use of police uniforms was a brilliant psychological tactic. It simultaneously eliminated the competition and further demoralized the genuine law enforcement. Although Capone himself was in Florida at the time, establishing a clear alibi, no one doubted who ordered the hit. The massacre shocked the nation and finally turned the tide of public opinion against Capone. The violence was no longer a matter of hidden crime. It was a horrific public spectacle. President Herbert Hoover declared that he would make the elimination of Capone a top national priority. The traditional avenues for prosecuting Capone, murder, bootlegging, and gambling, were all blocked by his corrupted police force and bribed judges. 2 separate federal teams were formed to bring him down, the Untouchables, a specialized prohibition unit led by Agent Eliot Ness. These agents were famous for their refusal to accept bribes. Their primary goal was to conduct raids and physically dismantle Capone's liquor operations, disrupting his supply chain and costing him millions. The true threat came from a small group of Internal Revenue Service, IRS, agents, led by Frank Wilson. Their target was not alcohol or murder, but income tax evasion. Their theory was simple but brilliant. Under U.S. law, income from any source, even illegal ones, is taxable. If they could prove Capone had massive income but failed to file returns, they could convict him. The difficulty was gathering evidence. There were no bank accounts in Capone's name, and he never signed official documents. The IRS investigation was a masterclass in patient, nonviolent detective work. Frank Wilson and his agents spent years piecing together fragments of evidence. They found small-time bookkeepers who, terrified of Capone, but more terrified of prison, agreed to testify about the existence of the outfit's massive financial ledgers. The greatest breakthrough came from a seemingly minor trial of one of Capone's financial lieutenants. During this trial, a defense attorney, in a moment of arrogance, mistakenly introduced the actual detailed account books of the outfit into the public record as an exhibit. These ledgers detailed millions in income and proved Capone's ownership of the operation. Crucially, Wilson found documents that referred to large sums of money being paid to AL, a direct link to a massive undeclared income. They finally had the evidence. Capone's net income for the years 1925 to 1929 was over $1.3 million, yet he claimed no taxable income whatsoever. The federal government bypassed the corrupt local system and charged Capone with 22 counts of tax evasion. Capone arrived at the trial confident, believing he had bribed the jury. However, the presiding judge, Judge James Wilkerson, was secretly alerted to the attempted bribery and swapped the jury with one from another courtroom at the last minute. This brilliant last-second maneuver ensured an honest verdict. On October 17, 1931, Al Capone was convicted. He was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, the longest sentence ever handed down for tax evasion. The Untouchable was finally touched not by rival bullets, but by the relentless pursuit of the IRS. Capone was initially sent to a maximum security prison in Atlanta, but his celebrity status and ability to bribe guards made him too powerful. He was transferred to the newly opened federal prison on Alcatraz Island. There, the isolation and strict discipline finally broke him. While in Alcatraz, Capone's health rapidly declined. He was suffering from neurosyphilis, a condition he contracted decades earlier that went untreated. The once feared kingpin became a shell of his former self, his mental capacity fading rapidly. He was released from prison in 1939. The man who had once terrified a nation spent his final years in a quiet exile in Florida, his mind consumed by delusion, his empire long gone. He died of a stroke and pneumonia in 1947. The story of Al Capone is a silent testament to the idea that power built on corruption is fragile, and that sometimes the simplest law can defeat the greatest criminal. His empire vanished, but the underground network of tunnels, hideaways, and speakeasies he built still lies beneath the city of Chicago, remnants of the invisible empire. And if you are as fascinated by the secrets of history as we are, be sure to like and follow at Epoch Stride for more. Thank you for sticking with us until the very end. Tell us in the comments, if Al Capone hadn't been convicted of tax evasion, do you think anyone could have ever stopped him?